Jesus came proclaiming the kingdom of God is at hand, and that's the kind of thing we're thinking about over these weeks leading up to Easter, which will be upon us before we know it. The kingdom of God is at hand. It's so close that you can almost reach out and touch it. And I think we're beginning to get the message, aren't we? You know, it was there as Trevor led us in prayer that in Densham, God's kingdom is present if we have eyes to see it. And a few weeks ago, a word was shared, which we shared again on Tuesday night at the prayer event that I want to remind you of this morning, that just picks up that theme. It's something that was seen and something that was heard. And what was seen was this, that down Densham High Street from the Wilkinson's end, which is over there, isn't it? I saw a giant vine creeping. This is not Jack and the Beanstalk. This is the presence of God, the vine, the true vine. I saw a vine creeping. Its branches went into every window and door. It went into the church, down to the marketplace. It grew strong and steadily through the town. And then these words. At this point, the speaker said, "We and God have a rhythm to work to. It is God's pace. And if we work to it, that's God's pace, the vine will grow strong." And I think as the elders and I reflected on that, there were two things occurred to us. First was this, that this thing starts with God and not us. And the kingdom of God is like that, isn't it? It's about being attentive to what God is already up to and joining him rather than the other way around. And the other key thing was this business about rhythm and timing, which we're not very good at in this country or this culture, are we? Like everything instantly. But God's rhythm and God's timing is different. And we need, and as it says there, is the encouragement to work at God's rhythm. It's God's pace. And if we do that, then the vine will grow strong. And that all plugs in to the overall theme of what we're looking at, which is participating in God's kingdom. If God's kingdom is present, how can we participate in it? And God's kingdom is growing. And if we're to participate in that, then we need to understand how God's kingdom grows. And Jesus taught us about that. And we're going to read one of the parables, possibly one of the best known parables from Matthew 13, verses 1 through to 23. We're going to read together. If you've got a Bible, maybe you'd like to turn to Matthew 13 with me. When Matthew writes about the kingdom of God, he calls it the kingdom of heaven, and that's because he is writing to a Jewish audience. But it's the same thing, it's the same idea, it's just a slightly different term. So Matthew 13, starting from verse 1, says, "That same day Jesus went out of the house and sat by the lake. Such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat in it, while all the people stood on the shore. Then he told them many things in parables, saying, a farmer went out to sow his seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places where it didn't have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. He who has ears, let him hear." The disciples came to him and asked, "Why do you speak to the people in parables?" Jesus replied, "The knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them. Whoever has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. This is why I speak to them in parables. Though seeing, they do not see. Though hearing, they do not hear or understand. In them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah. You will be ever hearing, but never understanding. You will be ever seeing, but never perceiving. For this people's heart has become calloused. They hardly hear with their ears, and they close their eyes. Otherwise, they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn, and I would heal them. But blessed are your eyes, because they see, and your ears, because they hear. For I tell you the truth, many prophets and righteous men longed to see what you see, but did not see it, and to hear what you hear, but did not hear it. Listen then to what the parable of the sower means. When anyone hears the message about the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what was sown in his heart. This is the seed sown along the path. The one who received the seed that fell on rocky places is the man who hears the word and at once receives it with joy. But since he has no root, he lasts only a short time. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, he quickly falls away. The one who received the seed that fell among the thorns is the man who hears the word. But the worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke it, making it unfruitful. But the one who received the seed that fell on good soil is the man who hears the word and understands it. And he produces a crop yielding 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. It's a very familiar parable to us. It's one of the more straightforward parables because Jesus gives us an explanation. There are one or two other little one-liners that Jesus uses that people still puzzle over today, exactly what Jesus was on about. But in this one, we have a full explanation. We also have a fascinating little kind of sideways look Jesus gives in the middle of that about why he uses parables. I'm not going to explore that with you this morning, but it is interesting to look at. But I do draw your attention to what he says at the beginning. He says in verse 11, he says, the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you. This idea of secrets, Jesus, the word he uses means he's saying to us, look, this is something you could never have worked out for yourself. However hard you thought about it or considered it, however clever you were, you could not have worked this out. You only get this by revelation as I reveal this truth to you. And Jesus is talking about the way in which the kingdom grows. And we wouldn't have worked it out logically. One of the ways of entering into a parable or exploring a parable is to ask a simple question. And that's this. When you hear this parable, who or what do you identify with? Where do you get drawn into the story so that you're not just looking from the outside, but you become a participant in it? In the parable of the sower, who or what are you identifying with, I wonder? Do you start immediately leaping in and thinking, which soil am I? I think if I'm honest, I'm all of these and several more several times a day. If you're concerned this morning about which soil you are, then can I suggest to you that you are probably at least verging on being good soil. Because if you're bothered about it and worried about it, if you really are, then you'll do something about it. If you're unconcerned, then you will probably fall into one of the other categories. Whilst it's appropriate, and there are some great sermons on the different levels of soil, I think if we focus on that first, actually we miss Jesus' point. It's very interesting what Jesus calls this parable. What does he call it in verse 18? He says, listen then to what the parable of the sower means. It's quite interesting. If you read a number of commentaries about this passage, they almost suggest that Jesus got the title wrong. That it would be better called the parable of the seed or the parable of the soils. But Jesus calls it the parable of the sower. Why? Because that's what he wants us to think about. That's who he wants us to identify with. All of us are called to be sowers. That's the subject of the parable, the farmer, the sower. And you and I are invited to participate in God's kingdom by discovering what it is to be sowers, to be farmers. And as we participate in God's kingdom in this way, then this parable helps us understand what happens next, what happens with the seed that we sow.